Picture this. It is the spring of 1944, and somewhere in a modest flat in London, a man is sitting at a desk writing a letter to Adolf Hitler. Not literally, not with his own hand. But the words he's composing tonight will reach the Führer within days, translated, decoded and handed up through the layers of German military intelligence until they land on the desk of one of the most paranoid leaders in history. And Hitler will read them, and Hitler will believe them. The man at the desk is not a soldier. He is not a trained intelligence operative. He is a former chicken farmer from Barcelona named Juan Pujol Garcia. He has no formal espionage training. He has never fired a weapon in combat. He is, by any conventional measure, the last person on Earth who should be deciding the fate of the largest seaborne invasion in history. The intelligence that reached Hitler's desk had been smuggled out of Britain inside Spanish sausages, sent through the Lisbon post. And yet, in approximately 6 weeks, the words he writes tonight will freeze the most powerful armoured reserves in the German military in place, for days, at the precise moment when moving them could have thrown the Allied invasion of Normandy back into the sea. Not one tank round fired, not one aircraft scrambled, one man at a desk in the dark, writing lies that Germany cannot distinguish from the truth. His code name is Garbo, named by British intelligence after Greta Garbo, because he was considered the greatest actor in the world. And before this story is finished, you will understand exactly why that name was the most accurate assessment British intelligence ever made. A chicken farmer from Barcelona was about to decide the outcome of the Second World War. Welcome to Inside the War Room, the series that goes behind the battle, behind the orders, and behind the official record. We cover the intelligence that shaped campaigns, the deception that decided outcomes, and the individuals who changed history without ever appearing in the history books. If that is the kind of history you have been looking for, subscribe now and hit the bell. You will not want to miss what is coming. Now, back to London, back to the flat, back to the man at the desk. Before we follow Garbo into the deception that changed the war, you need to understand the world he was operating inside. Because espionage in wartime Britain was not the glamorous game of shadows that films have sold you. It was a machinery with a very specific output at the end of it. Most German agents sent to Britain between 1940 and 1944 were not master spies. Many were recruited directly out of occupied European prisons, men handed a stark choice by the Abwehr, a parachute or a cell. They were poorly trained, often barely spoke convincing English, and were landing on an island where MI5 had already cracked the German Enigma codes and frequently knew they were coming before they hit the ground. One arrived in a field in Huntingdonshire in January 1941, broke his ankle on landing and fired his pistol into the air to summon help. He was found by farmers. He was carrying forged currency, a German radio transmitter, and a German sausage. Not a weapon, not a code document. A sausage, a cured German pork sausage of the kind that no English butcher had stocked since before the war, and no English civilian would have recognised as anything other than foreign. It was his food for the mission. He had packed it the way a man packs lunch, because somewhere in the planning of Operation Lena, the Abwehr's grand programme to seed Britain with intelligence agents, nobody had stopped to consider that the contents of an agent's pockets might tell whoever found him exactly where he had come from before he opened his mouth. The farmers who found him in that Huntingdonshire field on a January morning did not need to speak German to understand what they were looking at. The radio transmitter told them he had not come to visit. The sausage told them where he had come from. The broken ankle told them he was not going anywhere. His name was Joseph Jacobs. He became the last man ever executed at the Tower of London, shot sitting in a wooden chair because his broken ankle made standing at the post impossible. 8 soldiers from the Scots Guards took aim at a small white cotton target pinned over his heart. He was allowed to hold a crucifix. He asked for a blindfold. The volley came at 7:15 in the morning of August 4th, 1941, in the cold of the rifle range at the Tower. It was over in seconds. The British intelligence officer who catalogued his possessions that morning noted the sausage in his report with the particular restraint of a man who has seen enough to find very little surprising. It sat on an evidence table alongside the radio transmitter, and the forged currency as a precise illustration of the gap between what German intelligence believed it was doing and what it was actually doing. The Abwehr had sent men into Britain carrying the wrong food, the wrong accents, and in several cases the wrong shoes. One agent had arrived wearing continental European footwear of a style that had not been sold in England for years. They were being detected not by brilliant counterintelligence work alone, but by the elementary failure to think through what an Englishman actually looked like from the inside. Garbo understood that gap better than anyone. His entire operation was built on the precise knowledge that the Abwehr trusted things it should have questioned, and that once it trusted something completely, it stopped looking for reasons to doubt it. The ones who landed more cleanly fared little better. They were taken to a Victorian house on Ham Common in southwest London, officially the London District Interrogation Centre, known as Camp 020. Here, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Robin Stevens, called Tin Eye for the monocle he never removed and reportedly never took off even to sleep, captured agents faced a choice with no good answer: cooperate, turn double agent, and feed controlled lies back to Berlin under British supervision, or refuse, face trial under the Treachery Act of 1940 and hang at Wandsworth Prison. 16 men made the wrong choice. Britain executed them all. Here is the part most people do not know, and it matters more than almost anything else in this story. The cyanide pill, the spy's last resort, the one thing every thriller has burned into your imagination, was not a German invention. It was British. The SOE developed what they called the L pill, a pea-sized glass ampule wrapped in brown rubber, filled with concentrated potassium cyanide, designed to be bitten down on if capture was imminent. Heartbeat stops within minutes. It could be sewn into a shirt collar, hidden in a false tooth, carried in a pocket. SOE agents operating in occupied France, the Netherlands, and Norway carried it routinely. Some used it. Most hoped they never would. The Germans, by contrast, did not routinely issue their agents going into Britain with any such option, which tells you something about how the Abwehr viewed the men they were sending. They were largely expendable. Prison recruits, opportunists, true believers handed minimal training and dropped into a country that was waiting for them. No exit strategy, no last resort, just the mission, and whatever happened after. What happened, almost without exception, was Camp 020. The system Britain built was coldly elegant. A turned agent was worth infinitely more alive than dead. A live channel through which MI5 could pump whatever version of reality served them best. A dead agent was simply a message to the next one. We are watching, the island is sealed, and the odds are not in your favour. Garbo understood this world completely. He had walked into it voluntarily from the outside with no training and no safety net, no L pill sewn into his collar. Every report he sent, every fictional agent he invented, every carefully timed delay and small human error existed inside a system where one wrong detail meant Camp 020, and Camp 020 meant a straight choice between controlled servitude and the gallows at Wandsworth. He built his fiction so precisely, so consistently, and with such psychological intelligence that the choice never came. For 3 years, the most dangerous man in British intelligence was a man Germany trusted completely, and Britain controlled entirely. He had never been to Britain when he first made contact with German intelligence. He had never run an agent. He had never recruited a source. He fabricated his entire network from a room in Lisbon using a tourist guidebook, a railway timetable, and an imagination so precise and so disciplined that the Abwehr, Nazi Germany's military intelligence service, never once suspected that every single report coming out of his network was, from the very first word, a lie. To understand what Garbo did, you have to understand the problem he was solving. By 1944, the Allies had one decision to make that would define the entire war in the West: where to invade France, and whatever they chose, Germany would be waiting. The Wehrmacht was not broken yet. It still had experienced divisions, significant armour, and commanders in the West who understood exactly what an Allied landing needed to survive its first hours on a beach: speed of response, get the panzers moving before the invasion could establish itself, hit it while it was still fragile, still wet, still fighting for its first 100 yards of French soil. The Allies needed to stop those panzers from moving, not with guns, with a story. The story they built was called Operation Fortitude. Its premise was simple and audacious: convince Germany that the real invasion was coming at Pas-de-Calais, the shortest crossing point, the most logical target, the place German strategic logic already pointed, and that anything happening elsewhere was a feint, a diversion, a sacrifice designed to pull German reserves away from the real blow. To make Germany believe that story completely and irrevocably, they needed a voice Germany trusted above all others. They needed Garbo. What makes his achievement so extraordinary is not the scale of the deception, it is the patience of it. He did not walk into German intelligence in 1944 with a dramatic story about Normandy. He had been building his credibility for 3 years, brick by brick, report by report, establishing, over hundreds of small communications, that he was reliable, cautious, well-connected, and occasionally fallible in the small human ways that make a source feel real rather than manufactured. He created a network of fictional sub-agents across Britain. A Welsh nationalist with access to shipping schedules who drank too much and sometimes delayed his reports for reasons Garbo would apologetically explain. A disgruntled clerk stationed near an army camp in the Midlands who had a grudge against his superiors and a need for money. A Venezuelan student in London with useful social connections and a habit of picking up information at parties he had no business attending. None of them existed. All of them reported regularly, each one corroborating the others, building a picture that was detailed enough to feel authentic and controlled enough to point precisely where British intelligence needed Germany to look. The Germans paid them, funded their operations, approved their expenses. When Garbo reported that one of his sub-agents had died, a man who had never drawn breath, German intelligence processed the paperwork and approved a pension payment for his widow. The widow collected. She had also never existed. Somewhere in the ledgers of the Abwehr, there is an entry for a dead spy and a grieving woman, both entirely fictional, both funded by the Reich for months. That is not a footnote. That is the measure of how completely Garbo had replaced reality with something. There is a temptation to tell this story as a clean triumph of cleverness. It was not. Espionage at this level is grinding, terrifying work, and Garbo lived inside it for years with no guarantee it would hold. Every report had to be internally consistent with every previous report. Every fictional sub-agent had to behave in ways that matched their invented personality and location. Every piece of genuine intelligence that might reach Germany through other channels had to be accounted for, absorbed, explained. One contradictory detail, one report from a separate German source that did not fit Garbo's picture, and the whole edifice could crack, not slowly, immediately. Because the Abwehr, for all its failures, was not staffed entirely by fools. If they began to suspect one report, they would review every report, and then the whole 3 years of carefully constructed trust would collapse backwards into nothing. He managed that pressure by being almost perfect. He did not try to be flawless. A flawless source raises suspicion. He made small mistakes, sent information that arrived too late to be useful, missed occasional details, just enough to feel human, just not enough to raise doubt. The British intelligence officers running him later described working with him as unlike anything else in their experience. He did not just follow instructions. He understood the logic of what they were building and contributed to it. He suggested angles. He identified vulnerabilities. He was not a tool being used. He was a partner in something that both sides knew could change the war. By the late spring of 1944, the full apparatus was in place. And here is the part that most accounts describe in a single sentence, because describing it properly makes the whole operation sound like something between military genius and elaborate farce. Across the fields of southeastern England, what German reconnaissance aircraft photographed on their high-altitude runs looked like the largest armoured concentration Britain had assembled since the war began. Sherman tanks in formation, artillery pieces in rows, fuel depots, supply dumps, the infrastructure of an army preparing to cross the Channel at its narrowest point toward Calais. Almost none of it was real. The tanks were inflatable rubber, engineer-designed inflatables that two men could erect in under an hour and deflate and move overnight. German reconnaissance photographing the same field on consecutive days would see an army that appeared to be advancing, repositioning, growing. The oil storage facilities were painted canvas stretched over timber frames. The landing craft massing in the Thames estuary near Dover were scaffolding poles wrapped in painted fabric, moored in convincing rows that from 3,000 feet looked like a genuine invasion fleet preparing to sail. The entire apparatus, codenamed Operation Quicksilver within the broader Fortitude deception, could be packed into a small convoy of lorries and reassembled somewhere else before the next reconnaissance flight arrived. 2 men, 1 hour. A Sherman tank made of rubber that had just fooled the Luftwaffe. Radio operators transmitted simulated signals traffic for divisions that did not exist. The fictional 1st United States Army Group, notionally commanded by General George Patton, a name the Germans deeply respected and deeply feared, generated a constant stream of communications pointing northeast toward Calais. Patton's Ghost Army was everywhere in the signals intelligence picture and nowhere on the ground. But physical deception alone was not enough. Germany needed to hear it confirmed from a source it trusted absolutely. Every inflatable tank in every English field, every painted canvas oil dump, every scaffolding landing craft in the Thames, all of it was worthless without a voice that Germany believed was watching them with its own eyes and reporting faithfully back to Berlin. That voice was Garbo. His network confirmed everything the reconnaissance aircraft were seeing. His sub-agents reported convoy movements, troop concentrations, logistical preparations, all of it pointing northeast. His reports arrived with the small delays and occasional gaps that made them feel like the product of real human effort under real operational pressure rather than a controlled information pipeline designed in a London office and approved before transmission. German intelligence assessed, consolidated, and reported upward. The 15th Army, one of the strongest formations in the West, equipped and positioned to respond to a major landing, was deployed near Calais. It was ready. It was waiting. It was pointed in exactly the right direction, the wrong direction. If this story making you reflect deeper, then do subscribe to Smokescreen Battles and hit the bell icon so you catch every new War Room episode. And leave a comment below. I want to know, do you think the D-Day invasion succeeds without Garbo? Or was Normandy always going to work regardless? 2 sides to that argument. Drop your answer below. Now, back to the command room, because this is where it gets complicated. To understand why Garbo's deception works so completely, you need to understand the fracture running through the German high command in France. Because Garbo did not just exploit Hitler's certainty, he exploited a command structure that was already cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. By the spring of 1944, Germany had 2 commanders in the West who could not agree on a single fundamental question: where to put the panzers. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding Army Group B along the northern French coast, had a theory built on bitter experience from North Africa. He had watched Allied air power destroy armoured formations the moment they tried to move in daylight. Columns of tanks caught in the open, strafed and bombed before they could reach the front, turned into burning metal before a single round had been fired at the enemy. His conclusion was stark and specific. The invasion had to be stopped on the beaches within the first 24 hours, or it would not be stopped at all. Every panzer division had to be positioned close to the coast, ready to counterattack within hours of the first landing craft hitting the sand. Dispersed, dug in, close enough to reach the waterline before Allied naval gunfire and tactical air support made movement impossible. Once the Allies established a foothold, Rommel argued, the window would close and it would never open again. His superior, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the 69-year-old Commander-in-Chief West, disagreed completely. Rundstedt was old Prussian officer class, measured, methodical, contemptuous of what he privately considered Rommel's operational panic. His argument was classical and logical. Hold the armour back in a central reserve, well inland, away from Allied naval guns. Let the Allies commit themselves to a landing. Identify the main effort with certainty. Then concentrate overwhelming armoured force at the decisive point and crush the lodgement before it could expand. A massed panzer counterattack, properly timed and properly concentrated, could drive the invaders back into the sea. Both men went directly to Hitler, and Hitler, with the particular genius of the indecisive autocrat, gave neither of them what they wanted. Of the 11 panzer divisions in the west, Rommel was given direct control of 3. Von Rundstedt controlled 4 more through Panzer Group West. But the 4 that mattered most, the elite 1st SS Leibstandarte, 12th SS Hitlerjugend, 17th SS Panzergrenadier, and the powerful Panzer Lehr, were placed under Hitler's personal authority at Wehrmacht Supreme Headquarters. They could not be moved without his express permission. Not Rommel's permission, not Rundstedt's. Hitler's alone. Von Rundstedt complained bitterly after the war that his sole prerogative as Commander-in-Chief West had been to change the guard at his own gate. He was not exaggerating. The man nominally responsible for defending the entire western coast of occupied Europe could not deploy his best armoured divisions without first waking the Führer and waiting for him to agree. And on the morning of June 6th, 1944, nobody dared wake Adolf Hitler. He had taken a sleeping draught the night before. His staff stood outside his bedroom at the Berghof in Bavaria, his mountain retreat, hundreds of miles from the beaches where the landing was already underway, while the invasion unfolded, waiting for him to rise naturally. He slept until late morning. His staff discussed in hushed voices whether this was real or a diversion. Nobody made a decision. The window in which armoured reserves could have reached the beaches and changed the outcome was opening and closing while Germany's Supreme Commander lay asleep. The most powerful panzer reserves in the West were sitting motionless, waiting for a phone call from a man who was asleep. June 6th, 1944. The invasion begins at Normandy. In the first hours, the situation on the beaches is as desperate as anything the planners had feared. At Omaha, men are dying on the shingle, pinned under fire, unable to move inland, the landing craft burning behind them in the surf. The bodies of the first waves are washing back and forth at the waterline. The entire operation hangs on whether the foothold can be established and held before German armoured reserves arrive in force, before the panzers that Rommel wanted close to the coast reach the beaches and push what is left of the first waves back into the sea. Inside German command, the news from Normandy creates exactly the paralysis the Allies had spent months engineering, because the landing does not match the pattern. Calais is the main effort. Normandy is a feint. Every intelligence report for months has confirmed it. The inflatable tanks in the English fields confirm it. The Ghost Army signals traffic confirms it. Garbo's network confirms it. And now, here is Normandy. And German commanders at every level are asking the same question simultaneously. Is this the real invasion? Or is this exactly what the Allies want us to think it is? Von Rundstedt saw it for what it was almost immediately. He contacted OKW and demanded the release of the armoured reserves, the 12th SS Hitlerjugend and the Panzer Lehr, to move toward the beaches. These were not light screening forces. The 12th SS alone fielded over 20,000 men and nearly 200 tanks. The Panzer Lehr was arguably the best equipped armoured division in the German military, with full complements of Panzer IV and Panther tanks, and experienced crews who had fought across Russia and North Africa. Moving them toward Normandy in the first hours while the Allied lodgement was still fragile could have been catastrophic for the invasion. The request went up the chain. Hitler was asleep. His staff refused to wake him. The release was denied. The tanks sat. When Hitler finally rose and was briefed, his initial reaction was one of almost gleeful certainty. This was the diversion. Patton's army was still in England. Garbo's reports had confirmed it repeatedly. The real blow was coming at Calais. He reportedly told his staff that the news from Normandy was the finest news in a long time, that the Allies had finally revealed their hand, that the main force could now be caught crossing at Calais and destroyed before it reached the shore. He ordered the Panzer reserves not to move, and then Garbo sent the message that sealed it. On the night of June 9th, 3 days after the landing had begun, 3 days in which those critical armoured reserves sat motionless while the Allied foothold strengthened hour by hour, Garbo transmitted a long, urgent, detailed report to his German handlers in Madrid. It confirmed everything Hitler already believed. Normandy was the diversion. The real landing, the main Allied effort, was still coming at Calais. The forces in Normandy were there specifically to draw German reserves southwest, to strip the Calais defences before the decisive blow fell. The report was explicit, detailed, internally consistent with every report Garbo had sent for 3 years, and completely fabricated from the first word to the last. It reached Hitler. He read it. He accepted it completely. Hitler had actually released 17 divisions from the Calais area toward Normandy on June 8th, a brief moment of clarity that could have changed everything. Then Garbo's report arrived on June 9th. Hitler cancelled the order. The divisions stopped moving. Some had already begun their march west and were ordered to turn around, reversing the column, heading back to positions they had just left. That single report, written by a man in a London flat transmitted to a German intelligence officer in Madrid, passed to Berlin, read by the Führer himself, reversed a strategic decision that if left in place might have contained the Normandy landing before it could break out. The 15th Army, positioned near Calais, did not move. That decision, or rather that non-decision, that choice to wait, is one of the most consequential moments in the entire war. In the days immediately following the Normandy landing, the Allied position was genuinely fragile in ways that the eventual outcome obscures. The beaches were crowded. The supply situation was precarious. The breakout inland had not happened. The American forces at Omaha had taken casualties that, in any other theatre, would have been considered catastrophic. German armour, arriving in strength in those first 72 hours, had a real chance of containing the lodgement, isolating the beaches from each other, and forcing a crisis that might have ended in a fighting withdrawal back to the ships. It did not arrive, because it was waiting for a battle that was never going to happen, at a place where the invasion was never going to come. By the time German command fully accepted that Normandy was the real invasion, that Calais was the fiction, not the other way around, it was already late July 1944. The Allies were ashore in overwhelming numbers. Patton's real army, not the ghost but the man himself, commanding the real Third Army, was breaking out of the Normandy bridgehead and beginning the drive across France. The liberation that would eventually reach Paris, Brussels and the Rhine was already in motion. The one moment when the invasion could have been thrown back into the sea had passed quietly, almost without drama, while German armour sat in its assembly areas pointing northeast, and a chicken farmer from Barcelona sat in a London flat, writing reports that Germany could not bring itself to doubt. The greatest seaborne invasion in history was saved not by firepower or by numbers, but by a story that one man had spent 3 years making Germany want to believe. After the war, Garbo vanished. With British assistance, he faked his own death in 1949 and relocated to Venezuela, where he lived quietly for decades, running a small business known to nobody. He was not hiding in luxury. He was not debriefed annually by grateful intelligence services. He was simply gone. A man who had changed the course of history, folding himself back into anonymity, in a country where nobody knew his name or what he had done with it. He was rediscovered in the 1980s when a historian tracked him down. He returned briefly to Britain, where he was received with the quiet gratitude of people who understood what he had actually done. He shook hands with men in suits, in rooms that were probably not on any official map. He was polite and apparently somewhat amused by the whole thing. He died in Caracas in 1988. He was awarded the MBE by Britain and the Iron Cross by Germany. The only man in the Second World War to be decorated by both sides. Germany gave him his medal while the deception was still running, believing him to be one of their most loyal and effective agents. He accepted it. He kept the information from his British handlers for a period, not entirely sure how they would react. They were delighted. The man who had helped save D-Day spent the rest of his life as a nobody in South America, running a small shop, going to the market, coming home, and the world never knew his name. What Garbo built was not simply a deception. It was an epistemological trap, a word that sounds academic but describes something devastatingly simple. He did not just give Germany false information, he gave them a framework for interpreting all information. Once they trusted his network, they processed everything through it. Reports that contradicted his picture were explained away. Observations that pointed toward Normandy were reframed as confirmation of the Calais plan. The framework became self-reinforcing. The more Germany relied on it, the less capable they became of escaping it, because escaping it would have meant admitting that everything they thought they knew was wrong, and that is a conclusion that command structures built on certainty and hierarchy are almost constitutionally incapable of reaching in time. Rommel had been right, not about the panzers, about the fundamental problem. He had argued from the beginning that if the Allies established a foothold, it would be too late to drive them back. He was right. But he was working inside a command structure that could not agree on anything, overseen by a man who slept through the most important morning of the war, fed intelligence by a network that had been entirely replaced by the enemy. Rommel never had a chance to be right in time. Think about that for a moment, because it is the part of this story that most accounts skip straight past. The man who correctly understood the problem was overruled by a committee that could not agree, under a dictator who would not be woken, reading intelligence produced by a chicken farmer in a London flat. This is how belief works, in war and everywhere else. The most dangerous intelligence failure is not ignorance, it is certainty. An army that knows nothing is at least searching for answers. An army that believes it knows everything has stopped asking questions. And in the space between the question it stopped asking and the reality it refused to see, the thing it feared most is already happening. Hitler was absolutely certain, on the morning of June 6th, that he understood what the Allies were doing. He had the reports, he had the analysis, he had confirmation from his most trusted agent in Britain. He had inflatable tanks photographed by the Luftwaffe that confirmed what the reports said. He had signals intelligence from ghost divisions that confirmed what the tanks confirmed. Everything pointed the same way. He was wrong about all of it, and by the time he knew he was wrong, France was already being lost. One man with a typewriter and a tourist guidebook had done what no army could. He had made the most powerful military machine in Europe stand still and wait. at the one moment in the entire war when standing still and waiting was the only thing that could destroy it. He built his network from nothing. He sustained it for 3 years on patience and precision. He sent the message that cancelled the order that might have ended the invasion, and then he faked his own death and went to run a shop in Venezuela. Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbo, codename chosen because he was the greatest actor in the world. He was. And the curtain only came down when he chose to lower it. Before he died in Caracas in 1988, Juan Pujol Garcia was asked what he was most proud of. He did not mention Hitler. He did not mention the Iron Cross. He simply said this:
"My main pride and satisfaction has been the knowledge that I contributed to the reduction of casualties among the thousands of servicemen fighting to hold the Normandy beachheads."
The morning came in silence, no birds upon the line. She folded up his jacket and said, "The train's on time." He tried to stand like iron, like fathers think boys should. But in the kitchen doorway, he looked less brave than good. So go, my son, with God above, and take your mother's prayer. The world has turned to fire now, but my love will meet you there.
If the story of Garbo, the chicken farmer from Barcelona who built a spy network from a tourist guidebook and saved the largest invasion in history, stayed with you, subscribe to Smokescreen Battles right now. We go behind the battles and inside the war rooms, the commanders who led them, the individuals history forgot to name, and the operations that decided the outcome before the first shot was fired, the ones who changed everything and received almost nothing for it. Click the video on screen now. The next story is already waiting. I will see you there.